The waitress hissed at my birthday dinner, "Don't drink that." And 5 minutes later, when I raised my glass to toast the table, my oldest son Michael's face went paper white. That's when I knew someone at my own 65th birthday celebration had tried to kill me. The wine glass trembled in my hand, not from age, but from the realization that one of my children, the people I'd sacrificed everything for, wanted me dead. I sat there in Romano's restaurant, the same place where I'd celebrated every milestone with my family for 20 years, staring at faces I thought I knew. The dim lighting that used to feel warm and intimate now seemed sinister, casting shadows that made everyone look guilty. My late wife Marie's empty chair seemed to mock me. She would have known which one of our kids had poison in their heart. But I was alone with this terrible knowledge, surrounded by family who felt like strangers. If you've ever trusted someone completely only to discover they wanted you gone, if you've ever realized that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, then settle in. This story's got betrayal that runs deeper than Detroit River, and truth that cuts sharper than any blade. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of the darkest things, and sometimes it takes a stranger's courage to save us from our own family. I'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. Retirement had been lonely since Marie passed 2 years ago, and having all my kids together felt like a gift. Michael had insisted on picking the restaurant, David had handled the reservations, and Patricia had promised to bring Marie's favorite flowers for the table. It was supposed to be perfect, a celebration of reaching 65 with my health, my pension, and my family intact. I should have known that perfect was too much to hope for. The evening had started beautifully. We'd shared stories, laughed about old times, and for a moment, I felt like the patriarch I'd always dreamed of being. But then Linda, our waitress who'd served our family for 15 years, leaned down while refilling my water glass and whispered those 3 words that changed everything. "Don't drink that." Her eyes were wide with fear, her voice barely audible, but the urgency was unmistakable. Someone had done something to my wine. My first instinct was to look around the table, to study each face for signs of guilt or malice. But they were all smiling, talking, acting normal. Patricia was showing photos of her kids, David was checking his phone, and Michael was telling some story about a difficult client. It was like watching a play where I suddenly realized I was the only one who didn't know the script. The betrayal was sitting right there with us, wearing a familiar face and sharing my last name. But here's what my would-be killer didn't count on. I've been playing poker since I was 12, and I know how to hide my hand. If you want to know how a stranger's whisper saved my life and exposed a family secret that destroyed everything we'd built together, then hit that subscribe button. I'm Clarence Jenkins, and this is the story of the birthday dinner that taught me the difference between family and blood. Stay with me. This tale gets darker before it gets light. Michael was my golden boy from the day he took his first breath. When Marie was pregnant with him, I worked double shifts at the Ford plant just so we could afford the best crib, the softest blankets, everything a first child deserved. He was smart as a whip, charming as Sunday morning, and had this smile that could convince you to give him your last dollar. "That boy's going places," the neighbors used to say, watching him sell lemonade with the confidence of a Wall Street banker. I believed them with all my heart. I taught him everything I knew about being a man. How to fix a car engine, how to tie a proper necktie, how to shake hands like you mean it. When he played Little League, I was there for every game, cheering louder than any parent had a right to. When he struggled with math in middle school, I spent my evenings at the kitchen table with him, working through problems until we both understood. "You're gonna be somebody special, son," I'd tell him, watching him finally grasp a concept. "You're gonna make the Jenkins name mean something." Marie used to worry that I spoiled him too much, gave him too much attention compared to Patricia and David. "Clay, he needs to learn that the world won't always hand him what he wants," she'd say, watching me slip him an extra 20 for the movies. But Michael had this way about him, this magnetic personality that made you want to make him happy. When he graduated high school as salutatorian, I bought him a car. When he got into college, I took out a second mortgage to pay his tuition. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in our family's future. The first crack in my perfect son appeared during his senior year of college. He'd call home asking for money, not for textbooks or groceries, but for opportunities and networking events that always seemed to involve expensive restaurants and exclusive parties. "Dad, you have to spend money to make money," he'd say with that charming smile. When he graduated with a business degree and immediately got a job at a prestigious sales firm, I felt vindicated. My golden boy was finally golden in the eyes of the world, too. But success changed Michael in ways I didn't want to see. The humble kid who used to help me rake leaves became a man who talked about leveraging opportunities and maximizing potential. He started wearing suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, driving cars that made my 15-year-old pickup look like a relic. When I'd visit his apartment, I felt out of place among his expensive furniture and wine collection. "You've done good, son," I'd tell him. But something in his eyes had gone cold. The distance grew wider after Marie died. Michael came to the funeral in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's rent, shook hands like a politician, and gave a speech about how she'd taught him to pursue excellence. But I never saw him cry, never saw him grieve, never saw the little boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. It was like he'd learned to perform emotions instead of feeling them, and I was just another audience member watching his show. Looking back now, I can see the signs I ignored. The way he asked pointed questions about my pension and savings. The way he'd mention how expensive assisted living facilities were becoming. The way he'd joke about me living too long and costing the family money. I thought it was just his awkward way of showing concern for my future. I never imagined he was calculating how much longer he'd have to wait for his inheritance. The first real warning sign came 6 months ago when Michael suggested I meet with his financial advisor. "Dad, you need to think about estate planning," he said over coffee at my kitchen table, his tone serious and businesslike. "At your age, with your health issues, it's irresponsible not to have everything organized." I didn't have any health issues, just the usual aches and pains of a 64-year-old who'd worked with his hands for 40 years. But Michael had this way of making me feel ancient and fragile. During that meeting, Michael asked questions that made me uncomfortable. How much was my pension worth? What was the house appraised at? Did I have life insurance policies? "We need to know these things to plan properly," he explained. But something about his eagerness bothered me. The financial advisor kept looking at Michael instead of me, like I was already dead and they were dividing up my belongings. When they suggested I sign some papers to make things easier for the family later, I told them I needed time to think about it. That's when the pressure started. Michael began calling every few days with stories about families torn apart by poor estate planning, about elderly parents who'd waited too long to organize their affairs. "Dad, I'm just trying to protect you," he'd say when I expressed reluctance. "Do you want Patricia and David fighting over everything when you're gone?" He had this way of making his concern sound noble, while making me feel selfish for wanting to keep control of my own life. The phone calls became more frequent, more insistent. Michael would drop by unannounced with printed articles about elder care, statistics about cognitive decline, horror stories about seniors losing their independence. "I'm not losing my mind, son," I told him one afternoon, frustrated by his constant implications that I was becoming incompetent. "I can still think for myself." But his smile was patronizing, the same smile he'd used as a teenager when he thought I was being naive about the world. Things got strange when I started noticing discrepancies in my accounts. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there, that Michael explained away as processing fees or maintenance charges. When I called the bank directly, they said there had been several attempts to access my accounts online, all traced back to Michael's computer. "I was just trying to help you monitor your finances, Dad," he said when I confronted him. "You're getting forgetful about these things." But I wasn't forgetful, and we both knew it. The breaking point came 3 weeks before my birthday dinner. I'd caught Michael in my house going through my desk drawers claiming he was looking for your insurance policies to help organize everything. But I'd found him with my checkbook in his hands, and there was something guilty about the way he'd quickly put it back. "What exactly are you looking for, Michael?" I asked, and for just a moment, I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes before that charming smile slid back into place. That night I changed all my passwords, moved my important documents to a safety deposit box, and called my lawyer to discuss my options. Michael had always been my favorite, the child I'd invested the most hope and money in, but favoritism had blinded me to what he'd become. The golden boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a man who saw his father as an obstacle to his financial dreams. I just didn't realize how far he was willing to go to remove that obstacle until Linda whispered those 3 terrifying words. "Don't drink that." The moment Linda whispered her warning, Time seemed to slow down like honey in winter. I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing through possibilities, trying to understand how my birthday celebration had become a murder scene. The wine glass sat in front of me like a loaded gun, dark red liquid that should have been a toast to another year of life but was actually meant to be my last drink on earth. Linda moved away quickly, but not before I caught the terror in her eyes. She'd served our family for 15 years, had watched my kids grow up, had brought Marie and me anniversary cake on the house more times than I could count. If she was risking her job to warn a customer, then whatever she'd seen was deadly serious. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from rage. Someone at this table, someone with my blood, wanted me dead. I looked around the table with new eyes, studying each face for signs of guilt. Patricia was laughing at something David had said, her face open and innocent as always. David was quietly cutting his steak, the same methodical way he'd eaten since he was 5 years old. But Michael was watching me intently, his eyes focused on my wine glass with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When our eyes met, he smiled that billion-dollar smile and raised his own glass. "Come on, Dad, let's toast to your health." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My son, the one I'd sacrificed everything for, was encouraging me to drink poison while toasting my health. The wine glass felt heavy in my hand, heavier than any tool I'd ever lifted at the Ford plant. Everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting for the birthday patriarch to give a speech to celebrate another year of life before taking his last breath. "You know what?" I said, setting the glass down carefully. "Let me say a few words first." Michael's smile faltered for just a second, so quickly that anyone else would have missed it. But I was watching now, really watching, and I saw the flash of impatience cross his face. He wanted me to drink first, wanted to watch the poison work, wanted to play the grieving son when his father collapsed at his own birthday dinner. The calculation in his expression made me sick to my stomach. I stood up slowly, letting the moment build, watching Michael's face grow tense. 65 years old, I began, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. 40 years at Ford, 3 beautiful children, 2 grandkids, and a wife who loved me for 38 years before cancer took her away. My voice cracked slightly at Marie's name, not from emotion, but from the devastating realization that she'd died naturally while our son was planning to murder me artificially. Then I did something that took every ounce of poker-playing experience I'd ever gained. I picked up the wine glass, raised it high, and said, "Here's to family, the people who know you best and should love you most." I brought the glass to my lips, tilted it slightly, but let the wine touch only my tongue before lowering it again. And here's to the truth, which always finds a way to surface. When I looked directly at Michael, his face had gone completely white, like someone had drained every drop of blood from his body. In that moment, we both knew the game was over. The silence that followed my fake toast was deafening. Michael stared at me like he'd seen a ghost, which in a way he had, since I should have been dying instead of standing there watching him panic. His hands were trembling now, his confident salesman demeanor cracking like ice on a warm day. Patricia and David looked confused by the tension they could feel but couldn't understand, their eyes darting between their brother and their father, like spectators at a tennis match. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" Patricia asked, her nurse instincts kicking in as she noticed my untouched wine. "You look pale." The concern in her voice was genuine, which made Michael's betrayal even more heartbreaking. Here was my daughter worried about my health while her brother had just tried to destroy it permanently. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I told her, never taking my eyes off Michael. "Just taking my time with this wine. It's special." Michael excused himself to use the restroom, his movements jerky and unnatural. I watched him weave between tables, his usual smooth confidence replaced by the desperate gait of a man whose world was collapsing. He'd probably gone to throw up, or maybe to call someone, or perhaps just to stare at himself in the mirror and realize that his father wasn't as easy to kill as he'd thought. The golden boy had planned the perfect crime and watched it fall apart in real time. While he was gone, I caught Linda's eye across the restaurant. She was watching our table with obvious anxiety, probably wondering if her warning had come too late. I gave her a subtle nod, and the relief that washed over her face told me everything I needed to know about what she'd witnessed. This wasn't paranoia or a misunderstanding. My son had poisoned my drink, and only a stranger's courage had saved my life. When Michael returned, his face was flushed and his shirt collar loose like he'd been having trouble breathing. He sat down heavily and immediately reached for his water glass, draining it in one gulp. "Everything all right, son?" I asked, my voice deliberately calm. The word son seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He nodded quickly, too quickly, and mumbled something about not feeling well. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd planned to make me sick unto death, and now he was the one who looked like he might collapse. The rest of the dinner passed in a surreal fog. Patricia and David tried to maintain normal conversation, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Michael barely spoke, just pushed food around his plate and kept glancing at my untouched wine glass, like it was evidence at a crime scene. Every few minutes he'd ask if I was sure I didn't want to finish my wine, his voice tight with barely concealed desperation. "It's a good vintage," he kept saying. "Hate to see it go to waste." When the evening finally ended, Michael was the first to leave, claiming he had an early morning meeting. He hugged me goodbye, and for a moment, I felt the little boy he used to be in that embrace. But then he whispered in my ear, "Take care of yourself, Dad. At your age, you never know what might happen." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. He was warning me that this wouldn't be his last attempt, that my survival tonight was just a temporary setback in his larger plan. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after the restaurant closed, watching Michael drive away in his expensive sedan. My son, the child I'd loved most, sacrificed for most, believed in most, had just tried to murder me for money. The wine glass he'd poisoned sat on that table like a monument to my failure as a father. The truth came crashing down 2 days later when Linda called me at home, her voice shaking with fear and determination. "Mr. Jenkins, I can't sleep," she said. "What I saw that night, I have to tell someone official, but I'm scared I'll lose my job." She'd been carrying the weight of my near murder for 48 hours, probably wondering if she'd done enough to save me or if Michael would try again. Her courage in that moment, a single mother risking her livelihood to protect a customer, showed me more loyalty than my own son ever had. We met at a small diner across town where Linda told me everything she'd witnessed. She'd seen Michael slip something into my wine glass while I was distracted by Patricia's photos, his movements quick and practiced like he'd rehearsed them. "He had this little vial," she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "When he thought nobody was looking, he emptied it into your wine and stirred it with his finger. I've been serving tables for 20 years, Mr. Jenkins. I know the difference between sugar and poison." That afternoon, I called Detective Rodriguez at the Detroit Police Department. I'd known Maria Rodriguez since she was a rookie cop walking the beat near the Ford plant 15 years ago. She listened to my story with professional skepticism that gradually transformed into horrified belief as I provided details and Linda corroborated everything she'd seen. "Clay, this is attempted murder," she said grimly. "If that waitress hadn't warned you, you'd be in the morgue right now instead of my office." The investigation moved quickly. They tested the wine glass Linda had carefully preserved from that night, and the lab results confirmed traces of antifreeze, enough to cause kidney failure and death within hours. Security cameras from the restaurant's parking lot showed Michael arriving 30 minutes early, suspicious behavior for someone supposedly just joining a family dinner. His financial records revealed gambling debts totaling over $200,000, money he desperately needed and thought he could get through my life insurance policy. When they arrested Michael at his office, he broke down completely. Gone was the smooth-talking salesman, replaced by a sobbing man-child who couldn't believe his perfect plan had failed. According to Detective Rodriguez, he confessed everything: the poison, the motive, even his backup plan to try again if the first attempt failed. He kept saying he was sorry, Maria told me, but he was sorrier that he got caught than that he tried to kill his father. The hardest part wasn't Michael's arrest or the media attention that followed. It was sitting Patricia and David down and explaining that their brother had tried to murder me for inheritance money. Patricia cried for hours, not just for what Michael had done, but for the family we'd lost in that moment. David, quiet, David, just stared at me and said, "I always knew something was wrong with him, but I never thought he'd..." His voice trailed off because none of us could finish that sentence. The trial lasted 3 months. Michael's expensive lawyers tried to claim temporary insanity, gambling addiction, financial desperation, anything to reduce his sentence. But attempted murder is attempted murder, regardless of the motive. As I watched him in his orange jumpsuit, I saw the little boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, the teenager I'd been so proud of, the man who'd decided his father's death was worth less than his gambling debts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, and when they led him away, he looked back at me once, not with remorse, but with resentment, like I'd somehow wronged him by refusing to die on schedule. 2 years have passed since my birthday dinner became a crime scene, and I'm still here to tell the story. Michael is serving his sentence in Jackson State Prison, and we haven't spoken since the day they sentenced him. Patricia visits him sometimes, still hoping to find her brother underneath the man who tried to kill their father. David refuses to acknowledge he ever had a brother named Michael. As for me, I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you owe to people just because you share their DNA. Linda still works at Romano's restaurant, and every time I go there for dinner, she checks on me like I'm her own family. That night, she risked everything to save a customer's life, and in doing so, she showed me what real loyalty looks like. The restaurant management gave her a raise and a commendation after the story broke, recognizing that her quick thinking prevented a murder in their establishment. Sometimes the people who care about us most aren't the ones who share our blood, but the ones who choose to protect us when it matters. The hardest lesson I've learned is that loving someone doesn't guarantee they'll love you back, and raising someone doesn't guarantee they'll value your life. I gave Michael everything: my time, my money, my dreams, my pride. I worked overtime to pay for his education, sacrificed vacations to fund his opportunities, believed in him when others doubted. But somewhere along the way, I became more valuable to him dead than alive, and that's a truth no father should ever have to face. Patricia and David have grown closer to me since Michael's betrayal, like they finally understand how precious family relationships really are. We have dinner together every Sunday now, and they call to check on me during the week. We don't talk about Michael much, but his absence hangs over us like a shadow, reminding us that evil can wear a familiar face and speak in a loving voice. They've both told me they wish they'd seen the signs, but how do you recognize poison in someone you've loved your whole life? The money Michael was so desperate for is still sitting in my bank account, earning interest while he serves time. I've rewritten my will to leave everything to Patricia and David, with a special trust fund for Linda's daughter's college education. Michael gets nothing, not out of spite, but because he already took everything that mattered when he decided I was worth more dead than alive. Some betrayals are so complete that forgiveness becomes impossible, and some bridges burn so thoroughly that they can never be rebuilt. I still celebrate my birthday every year, but now it has a different meaning. It's not just another year of life. It's another year I survived despite someone's best efforts to kill me. Every candle on that cake represents a victory over the darkness that tried to claim me, a celebration of the stranger's courage that saved me, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who call you dad. So tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was capable of betraying you in the worst possible way? Have you ever been saved by a stranger's kindness when your own family failed you? This story changed my life and showed me the difference between blood relatives and real family. If it touched something in your heart, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. I'm Clarence Jenkins, and I've got more stories about survival, betrayal, and finding light in the darkest places. Thanks for listening to An Old Man's Truth. And remember, sometimes the people who want to hurt you most are sitting right at your dinner table.